when I should have left myself alone. But I couldn't have, oh no, I couldn't have. I always open my gut when I shouldn't have, oh no, I shouldn't have.
Okay.
You know it is. You know how Northerners are. Like we're not very professional, nor we're just off the cuff. You know what I mean? Shoot from the hip. But but it's great. You know there is a similarity between BSL and NZSL, right? Like with the signs. Obviously the alphabet is the same, but like there's different signs for fucking the same thing, and that used to wind me up. Like I learned kind of again off the cuff. I coached a lady who was hearing impaired. She had brain cancer and ended up going through that whole thing, and then it properly destroyed her hearing. So she learned some sign language, and then our little deal was like I coached her in my garage, right? And I was like, well, I'll coach you a little bit of fitness, and you coach me a little bit of sign language. So we just do a little bit of the back and forth, and mate, I poke her in the ribs every time because she was better without a hearing aids than she was with. You know, it's less sensory overload, especially when there's like cars going past. It can pick it up a little bit, right?
Yeah, it's really hard because when I first had my hearing aid, I hated it because basically it obviously amplifies sound. So I'd go to a coffee shop and all I could hear was like the coffee machine. I couldn't hear the person speaking to me. And my audiologist was like, eventually your brain will just start to filter it out. That's why they recommend wearing it for 7 hours each day to get used to it. But it would drive me mental. Like all I could hear like cars and like noises and like loud bangs. But eventually I did start to filter it out. But it took a lot of adjusting.
It was wild whenever we went to, just a local pool hall or fucking went out for a drink and that whatnot. Just to take them out. I was like, mate, I'll be the translator. Take out the fucking hearing aids because you just have no idea what's going on. And clearly, you're on a night out, so it's blasting. I was like, you don't need the music.
Yeah, you don't. Because I taught some of the girls here actually sign language. So when we'd be on nights out, like across the bar, if we saw like someone we thought was good looking, I'd like finger spell like it to them.
Nice.
So yeah, it was actually quite handy. Some of the girls know it. They don't know. I mean, they literally know words like fit, tall, dark, handsome kind of stuff. So I don't know how well it's gonna get them, but
just a bottle of olive oil. That's all you need, Like, mate, that's all you need. If you're letting your wing lady know, fair enough.
I guess I'll know.
Fucking that's the next level. Maybe it's gonna be the new dating advice, isn't it? Learn a little bit of sign, and you can have a little bit of mooshar on the side, and they're not gonna be none the wiser.
No, there's always perks and everything.
Especially the blokes. We're idiots. We're not gonna pick up on anything. You know what I mean? They'll be like, "Oh, look at that! It's a butterfly." Or where's the next beer coming from? Like if the chick's kind of doing something with her hands, as long as it's not kind of clasped and going up and down, he's not gonna have a clue what is going on.
I think they probably thought I was dancing.
Oh yeah, maybe. But mate, you got Jesus Christ. You got a fucking wild story.
Yeah, it has been crazy. I don't even know like where to begin. Like I was chatting to some of the girls about it the other night. And I was like the journey, like the surgeries, like yeah, it's been hectic, but it's been fun. We always joke that whoever's writing my story is a massive attention seeker and she needs to chill out because I'm like there's like plot twists at every corner at the minute, but yeah.
What keeps you going?
So I'm a yoga teacher, and I trained in an ashram, so it was very, very traditional. And I went in at 18 years old, like very egotistical, wanted to do the splits, wanted to do the handstands, and Divananda was my guru, and she sat me down and was like, everyone else was out doing all their sadness, their practice, and I had to sit and meditate for like 4 hours every morning.
Nice.
And I hated it, but it basically just like taught me to kind of like calm down and be happy with myself and with my brain. And I had my first surgery when I was 14 years old, and at 14, like I just suddenly had like 3 weeks in bed, and all my friends were at school. The year above were at prom, and I from a quite a young age, I sort of had to start these practices of being content, being by myself, and having like a good mentality. So it kind of started when I was 14, and then went into the ashram at 18, and there was a lot of meditation. We did Vipassana, which is where you don't speak for a couple of days, which I struggled with, but it was really good. And then by the time I had my second surgery at 21, I was very mentally strong, and I could sit like in bed for hours with kind of like no other stimulation and just think and be quite content. And I learned to track my thoughts and, recognize negative ones and just say stuff like, train my brain like, this thought doesn't serve me at the minute, like recognize it, move on. And then by the time I got to the third surgery, I was pretty sweet. And then obviously traveling across the world, I spent 3 days on the train across America, no Wi-Fi, my phone died. So my parents obviously loved me. They had no idea where I wasn't very organized with that. But I was just very content and very calm, and I could just write and like listen to music. So I think there's not like one trick that's helped. It's actually been years of like working on my mindset and training like the neural pathways and like my thoughts. So I'd say that, and also like I love my life. Like I wake up, I go have a smoothie bowl, I see my friends, I'm obsessed with my friends, I'm obsessed with Pilates. Like the girls joke that I like live for the first time every day. Like we went out for the first time last week since my surgery, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many lights, there's so many people, there's so much music, and they're like, you're so like in love with life. So I think that's what keeps me going, is I'm like, I genuinely love my life. Like the thought of being able to get back to Pilates or to go surfing again, it just excites me. And I know that one day I will be back doing it, whether it's 3 weeks or it's 3 months, because I've had these amazing experiences. I know that I can have them again. So yeah, that's kind of what keeps me going. The fact that I do just really love my life.
What are you trying to find?
In my life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm very happy, and I always say like when I write my vision boards and stuff, like what is my end goal? And I think one day like it would be to be in that beach town, to have a family and all of that. But I think I say when I meet people as well, like on nights out, like I am always like kind of looking for the one, but I'm in love with being single. So it's not just going to be anyone, it's going to be the one. And my lifestyle is so fulfilling. My friendships are so fulfilling. My workouts and my job are so fulfilling that all I'm really searching for is just that continuation. I think the biggest thing I crave at the minute would be consistency. I've had so many like chops and changes that I do long for the calmness. And some of my friends actually visited me from the UK over summer. They were like, New Zealand's so quiet. Like, gosh, like it was Thursday night. They were like, what are we doing? And I was like, I think that's why I'm so in love with New Zealand as well. I love the slow paced living, because I think everything's always been so hectic for me. So I think I found a lot of contentment in myself, but maybe in my life. But I also know that I have no control over that. Like I never know what's around the corner, but I take consistency, just continuing. If my life continued like this forever, I'd be content completely. So that's quite a nice thing to know.
It's just building that little bit of stability for yourself, right? Because you've been thrown into a fucking whirlwind, mate.
Yeah, I think as well, like I crave that security and that comfort, but I know that my life will never necessarily be straightforward because of my condition. I know that I can't like just hop on a plane if I need to go home, or like one of my best friends is getting married in October in the UK. So I know that there's always going to be routes that I'm going to have to take that will be a little bit different to someone else. But I think because of what I've gone through, I just know fundamentally that I'll always be okay, because I have been before, and I can't like there's been times every time I thought that this is it and like it's too much. It's just like showing me something new. So I think I find comfort in knowing that it will always be okay in the end.
Well, isn't that exciting? Trying to find a different route, rather than just hopping on a tin bird and, waiting over at Dubai airport or wherever the fuck, LAX or something. And you're like, no, I gotta figure out another way.
Definitely. And I think I read a quote quite recently, and it was like, if someone was reading your story, what would they want you to do? So anytime something like really rough happens, and this is also a yoga practice, I practice like dissociation, which I know has quite a negative connotation nowadays. Like people sort of say like, oh, it's really bad to dissociate, like make sure you're feeling everything, which I do, but to kind of have this like separateness from me and my life and just observe it has been really healing, because I kind of watch it, this diagnosis, there's been infections, they've gone back, they're not sure what it is, but just kind of having that observer mindset and not being in it too much and overwhelming, like experiencing what I'm experiencing, but also taking a step back, kind of like leaving it in my bedroom when I go to countdown and get excited about a new Tim Tam. Do you know what I mean? Like having that like separateness in my lifestyle has also been really helpful, because I'm like, with diagnosis, with the journey across the world, just being able to sit and be like, okay, cool, what's the alternative? Like, let's make something fun out of this. Like, right, you're sick, you're bedbound, it's 6 weeks and you're still ill. Let's learn French, let's learn sign language. And that's when I hopped on TikTok last month. Like, I didn't even have it. And the girls were like, start making your videos. And then obviously that's had such a great response. So I think there's always little pockets of like lessons or hope in everything, really.
Yeah, I think it's finding that balance, right? Like people who disassociate all the time, obviously it's not going to be too great. But also, if you're always in your feeling like that sometimes like living, just being your human being, is hard enough as it is. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to be so far in your head. You don't know which way's up. Like sometimes you just got to be like, all right, things are the way they are, and let's crack on with it. And
Yeah,
I think there's balance between those things.
completely. And learning that balance as well, I found very challenging, because I'm quite someone who like really wants to like make the most out of everything, and I definitely had to learn to slow down and feel. And I think that's why yoga serves me so much, because at the ashram they'd say empty, empty, happy, happy, but to be empty, empty, you have to feel, you literally have to purge. So I find myself sometimes when something like tough happens, immediately I go into, okay, what am I going to do from there? And I have to take a step back and be like, give yourself 3 days, give yourself 3 days to cry, to get over it, to feel it. And that's also why with the journey across the world, a lot of people were like, this is so crazy, you should share, you should talk about it. But I waited 1.5 years because I was also like, I need to figure out what I want to say. Like with all this misdiagnosis at the minute, I don't really know what I'm getting from it. Maybe in a year I will, but right now I can talk about the journey because I've processed it, I've felt it, I've finally found my feet in New Zealand with visas and everything, that I have something to say rather than just like, oh, this is crazy, watch this journey, but actually like I can hopefully inspire people and then talk about diagnosis and talk about facing hardships and mentality and stuff. So giving myself that period to feel and then be productive is something I'm still learning.
I agree. I think a lot of people are shouting, but nobody has anything to say.
Yes. Yeah,
It's
that's
a
definitely.
really strange place to be in because you're like, okay, well, what do you got to say? And they're like, you're like, what the fuck? Like, and it's not a theory, but I got this thing that I think about probably too often is like, people believe to become an adult, you just got to mature, right? Physically mature, whether you get to 18, 16, 9, as it is in the North, 40 as it is other places, whatever the fuck it is. It's like, well, what if it's actually the maturation of like how you feel and the character and related to us as well, rather than just like, oh, my balls are dropped and my voice is a little deeper, like you're now a man, here you go, here's the reins, like, and vice versa for a lady. I was like, well, what if you actually need to be able to put the finger on the emotion, like what you're actually feeling, and then create a logical and an illogical way of dealing with it? Because there's times that you got to sit down in your room and cry about it and figure it out and draw and write and fucking, I don't know, do your thing. And then there's other ways where you got to be like, well, I got to get through this regardless, but you have to know what that is. And I think I think ladies do a way better job about it than dudes do, and I think they also do a better job of having a logical answer of what to do. Because you ask a dude, what should you do about it? Oh, I don't know. If it's not fight it, fuck it, or feed it, like it's not really much else. Which is three ways, but not all the ways. So yeah, I think that's going to be the case.
I have two older brothers, and one of them works really closely with men's mental health. He's done so much for Movember, and he works quite hard with trying to like tackle toxic masculinity, but in an empowering way. Like he is lad's lad, rugby lad, loves a beer, supports West Ham, but he's also like very progressive, went to Cambridge, super intelligent, and it's really inspiring watching him and how he works in like kind of the male view because I've worked quite closely with a lot of teenagers. I have a lot of, for instance, with yoga, I had to call it stretch and relax to get the guys to come. I couldn't call it yoga. And then I like dabbled a bit with broga and then they started to come. So I think there's definitely a new wave of with men being able to feel all the emotions. And I've noticed like with the little ones that I used to look after when I lived in Greece, the little boys were always able to throw, kick, scream. And that was kind of their like tantrum, but then they'd never really sit with them and talk to them. Like it's so normal for a guy as he gets older, obviously very toxic, punch a wall. You don't really bat an eyelid at it. But if your boyfriend was sat there crying, you'd be a bit more like, oh goodness, what's going on?
So there's this bloke.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting because the chats I have with my girlfriends, like in comparison to the boy best mates I have, I think I had literally had a call with one of my best friends yesterday. He was having a few family issues. I was like, oh, like, how's it going? He's like, yeah, it's all right. I was like, man, a few words, aren't you? And he was like, yeah. Like, I was like, do you want to dissect this? And he was like, maybe in a bit. Like the difference was with the girls, we would like dissect everything, what he said, what she said. So it's very interesting having, and also I've grown up with two older brothers. I've had a very like male dominant kind of childhood, was always at rugby, dad ran the rugby club, kind of all that stuff, and my mum is like such a tomboy, so I've never really like been a girly girl, but found so much healing in my female friendships because they're always like, oh, like how do you feel? And like even with the journey across the world, like my guy mates were like, that's sick, like cool, like on you go. And the girls were like, oh my goodness, like are you okay? Like the difference was like, yeah, very apparent.
It's like that meme that pops around, right? Like 100% of dudes would quit their entire life to go on an unexplored expedition through the Arctic Circle. I was like, 100%, I'm in. Say less. Like, I'm not even taking a bag. I got my balls attached and I'm fucking there. Like, I'll go in a tank top and we'll figure out everything else. Like, we're just, there is some beauty in that. There really is. And there's, not so smart areas of it as well. But
yeah.
To understand that emotion, that feeling is necessary.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to fight yourself, and that's it's funny like you say that because it's the whole dichotomy of the last book I just wrote is basically you have to walk into your own abyss to figure out what's inside, and I think the answers that you seek is already within you. People and experiences just help pull it out. I really do.
Because there's a quote in yoga and it says, yoga is the practice of being a work in rather than a work out to teach you what you already know and to be who you already are. And we always say like in yin yoga, we have what are called rebounds. So it's the space between each posture. And we say like, listen, give space to what is. And I find every time I go to yoga, when I come out of it, I know exactly what I need to do. Not like the exact like circumstance, but I have this feeling of, okay, I'm safe, I'm fine, I can figure it out. And that is as well, similarly with me being someone who wants to get up, get on with it. Yoga gives me the space to be like, okay, let's settle and let's move from a strong foundation of safety and like a good intention rather than like with a journey across the world, I had to keep checking in with myself. Like, I talk a lot about love mode and fear mode. Like, am I doing this because I'm scared and I want to get through it? Or am I doing this with an intention? Like, how am I navigating this? And it's the same with when I wake up from the surgery and he was like, oh, it wasn't there. I didn't say anything. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, how long's recovery? And like my friend was next to me and she was like, did you hear what he said? And I was like quick to be like, yeah, I know, but it's done now. Like, what's the point in that? And then she was like, yeah, that's kind of like upsetting. Like, you know, you went through all this, you cut this muscle in your neck, blah, blah, blah. You're going to be out for months. And like, immediately my reaction was like, yeah, but like, well, yeah, what can I do about that? And then it's 6 weeks later. And last night in yoga, I was like, sat in the studio and being like, okay, how am I processing this? Like, there's a lot of disappointment, there's a lot of, you know, frustration, and then journaling and figuring it out. So once again, finding that balance of getting up and getting on, but allowing myself to like live the experience. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think with yoga, like I was saying before, there's not like one trick that I do that like gets me through. Because everyone said to me like, oh my gosh, like you always have setback after setback. Like, how do you get through it? And I'm like, it is years and so much behind the scenes. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, Dr. Alex from Love Island, and he was talking about, he was a doctor in Love Island. You should watch it. He's really cool.
I'm not judging you.
He was, and he was talking about how trauma like damages your brain like momentarily, and like it was really interesting. And he was talking about that and what you do and how you get over it. And I was like, with surgeries, with the first surgery, with the second surgery, with the third surgery, with the journey, like with everything, I was like, these are traumas that, although I'm not like, I think when you hear the word trauma, I think like, oh, I'm not like super upset, I'm not completely disturbed by this, like that wasn't traumatic. I'm like, it was trauma and it was traumatic, and I need to approach it in the same way. So I've spent this like most recent surgery has been so interesting for me because I've spent months and like weeks even just focusing on understanding everything more, because I'm like, yeah, I can get up and I can get through it, but now on like a more like physiological and like physical level, being like, what's happened to me? So I've had a massive muscle cut in my neck. How is that affecting my spine? How is that affecting my posture? Mentally, how am I feeling? So yeah, I think like when people say like, oh, like how on earth do you get through it, or like you're so positive, you're so determined, I think like that's kind of one layer. That's my get up, get through it. And I could, you know, tread water with that mentality for so long, but it's the layers of sort of like unwinding, and like that in yoga we call it like satya, like this truthfulness, and svadhyaya, like self-study of diving into what's going on, like being real with myself and being like, okay, how am I actually getting through this besides like the surface level, like just physically get through it, you know?
Yeah, because the journey's not stopped. It's not over. Getting through it is almost the beginning.
Yeah, I feel like it is. I feel like it's like when you get pushed over, immediately you get up and then you check your wounds and, you know, whatever. I think the first couple of weeks, even when you look at like physical injuries, like, you know, you have the acute stage of it, all the collagen goes down, all of that stuff. Like I was looking at it and I was like, 2 to 3 weeks, I'm still in that acute stage. Like it's kind of like so unrealistic for me to think 2 to 3 weeks I'm up, I'm out and back to work, because I was like, my body's like hardly even there, let alone what's going on like the inner turmoil. So just giving myself space to, you know, take time.
Yeah, I think that's where fitness has a unique position, right? We can use the physical realm of like, let's move this thing, this meat sack, let's interact with the world around, right? And hopefully benefit our health so we can carry on doing this. But then we also need to pair it with a little bit of the quote unquote hippy dippy stuff, or the philosophy stuff, or the you know, the stuff that's a little, come on, bro, I just want to lie down and push something heavy off my tits. I was like, cool, we can do that. And guess what? We're going to do that first, you know, because unfortunately / fortunately, whatever, like people have got these masks on and they've got a wall up, right? And I was like, well, sometimes we just got to come in with a fucking wrecking ball like Miley Cyrus and break that bitch down. And that usually happens from fitness, right? Working out something heavy, Pilates, a dirty workout, going for a walk, whatever. But that barrier comes down, and I'm going to leave it to the smart people to tell me why. You know, I'm blonde, so you know it comes down. That's all I need to know. All right, sweet. And then what? Then, you know, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of kids over the years, and I like the kids that are a little fucked up, the ones that have got the ASBOs attached to them, right? They're either going to go left and they're going to go with some special bracelets for a while, or they're going to go right and actually pay tax. So at that little crossroad is quite interesting. So you smash them in the face with, I don't know, burpees and wall balls, and then you give them all a notebook and or a piece of paper and a pen, and you turn pretty much the music off. It's gone. There's less stimulation in the room, and you give them 10 minutes. And they don't have to write anything. They could draw it if they want, but they have to basically express how they feel. So they've got to go through the check engine light of like, well, my heart rate's up, but now it's coming down. So my brain's got a little bit more oxygen and it's working a little bit more, and they can check in with themselves. And honestly, mate, the shit that kids come out with is fascinating. And I don't need to know. They could bin it, they could burn it, they could keep it, whatever. But if you do that consistently and you take a little snapshot in your brain of like young Jimmy, for example, when he came in, one of those angry kids, probably carries around a shiny at school, right? And then 8 weeks later, he comes in, you've done it consistently. That's a different kid. Why? Well, you've not really had a great deal of impact on him. Like, yeah, he's been in an environment which is constructive rather than destructive, but like he's understood who he is a little bit more and like what he's going through, right? And then, you leave it to the English teachers and people like yourself who are a bit more articulate with the way they verbalize themselves, and they can learn vocabulary to be able to then express it, and then maybe we can develop better relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, platonic, it doesn't fucking matter, of like you can then do a little bit of this, a little bit of the communication, rather than like, oh, fuck that, and it's like, well, okay.
It's interesting because a lot of that mentality as well and that mindset, I find it, especially, don't want to generalize, but with men, is they have this massive resistance to yoga, and they go to a yoga class, they hate the first 5 minutes, they can't sit still, they do the workout and they're like, okay, this is cool, they go through the flow, the relaxation at the end is nice, but it's when you work with them so long, because it is so confronting to internalize when you're still. So for instance, I teach a lot of yin yoga. When you're still, your body's not moving, you internalize. So we call it the chatahara, the monkey mind, will start talking to you. So the second your body is slow, your brain's got nothing to play with. So you go in, and that can be uncomfortable. So I see the men usually in my class, like first minute I say, okay, have a little bit of movement, and then we're going to sit here. They're moving their knee, they're lifting their arm, they're looking up, and I'm like, you're uncomfortable. And I say a lot of the time, like, can you sit with this stillness? Is it like a physical discomfort, or are you trying to move out of a mental discomfort? And it's been I've taught yoga since I was 18, so it's been really fascinating watching the men who would come to stretch and relax, and they do a little bit of a stretch out, then they start coming to the flow classes, and usually by the end they will be at a yin yoga class, and they will be able to have a little of a shift around, and then they can internalize. And that's work. That's most of them go to the gym, they lift heavy, they go for a run, they get back, they eat some food, they go to bed or whatever. But having that integration phase where you do something and then you let everything settle, and it's why, like, in the Western world, like traditionally when yoga years and years and years and years ago, so much of the practice was the meditation. But now, because we live quite like sedentary lives, for instance, if you're in an office, we only have those like 5 minutes at the start for where you do your meditation, and then we need to move, because the way that we're programmed is you can't really sit there, they're not going to be able to do it. So it's really interesting now, as people, I think there's definitely a new wave in like wellness and the run communities and stuff, and you can see that even like reformer Pilates is starting to like pop off. And I work at a studio in Auckland called Sala, which is really cool. Like the people that work there and the people who own it, just very clever, cool people. And you see now the types of people that are coming in, and especially the guys who have transitioned from very like what I'd say like generic fitness, but they are also now craving like the modalities of yoga and stuff to slow down, internalize, because it goes hand in hand. Like I do a lot of strength training. You probably can't tell, I'm like 5 foot, nothing on me, but like a lot of strength training, a lot of reformer Pilates, and all of that is amazing, and I love it, like so physically good for me. But I just feel like I wouldn't be anywhere near in my like the rest of my life without that slowness that yoga's taught me. And it's cool watching people find the movement and find the workout, and then find the work in and be like, right, okay, I get the buzz with everything else now, and then they find that balance. And I'm like, you know, you have your mat and then you have your life off the mat, but what you're doing on the mat will spill into your life outside. But it's cool watching people like get it. Like I say to my friends when they come, I'm like, you won't get it for a bit. Like with yin yoga, I feel like you'll come and you'll be like, okay, yeah, it was a good stretch. It kind of hurt because we were there for, you know, targeting the fascia for 4 minutes. And then they'll come and they'll be like, oh, I was actually thinking about so and so and how I felt. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm like, yeah, because you were a hip opener, you know what I mean? And I'm like letting it settle with them. But yeah, it's so cool. It's so cool.
It's teaching life through the medium of fitness.
Oh God, movement is, and I spoke about it quite recently, like being still now, it means that like 80% of my practice as such has been meditation, but I didn't realize how much my mental health relied on my movement modalities, because it was easy for me to like go do a workout, feel better, and then be like, oh sweet, I feel amazing, and then kind of start to neglect like the meditation so much as how I used to. And then when I'm straight back in bed and I can't just go for a walk, go out, see my friends, go to a Pilates class, I was like, oh, we're straight back in that ashram when I was 18 years old and I had to sit and meditate for hours. I'm like, yeah, okay, we're back on the groundwork doing that, you know, being content with myself. But it is constant. Like you said, the journey never stops.
No, it can't. You can't allow it to. And even when it gets a little bit of a dull moment, it's like you have to seek it out. You know, you see it quite regularly now of like you got to seek out adversity, you got to seek out do hard things, and I think it's incredible. You know, you got to go do hard things, and hard is relative, and so is intensity. You know, for someone that might be to sit still for 5 minutes. You know, I could name a lot of people like that. You know, for others it might be like doing 100 miles. You know, in minus 10 degrees or whatever it is, right? Like it's whatever people like to do, and I understand both. You know, it's like it's getting a little bit of that hardship, adversity, but it's a little bit of time where you're forcing yourself to go inwards.
Yeah.
And you're like, right, what is this, pal?
Yeah.
You know, because it's weird. It's I don't really understand it. I was like, well, okay, well, if you don't understand it, you have not been going long enough. So we got to keep going.
I think as well, like you know, obviously it's been so cool as a sense of being sick this time and having all this time off, is I've been thinking a lot more about my journey, and people have commented like, why would you do that? And I was like, really being able to be like, I know why I did that, because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. I wanted to prove that I could do hard things, and that like, can I actually do this? Can I get on this boat? Can I go across the world by myself? Can I make my own life in New Zealand? Like I got dumped a couple of days into the journey and I was like, am I going to go home? Am I going to turn around? Like, what am I doing? Like, and I have this ideology of my life and how I want it. And I think the excitement that I always talk about for my life, and, you know, you're talking about people doing hard things. I think if a lot of like what's helped me is that mental shift of like, it is such a blessing to be able to move my body. I feel so lucky that I have these amazing friends that I can go get a smoothie bowl and experience. Like I can't taste on one side of my mouth. So when on my second surgery, they cut my taste nerve. And the girls were like, that must be rubbish. And I was like, yeah, but like I can't explain to you how good the food tastes on the other side because like the contrast. And they were like, Beth, like it's crazy. And I was like, but now I like appreciate food so much more because I'm like, oh my God, it tastes amazing. Because this side would taste nothing. So then I'll like switch it over and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I think that, yeah, what has helped, and like really similar to what you're saying about pushing yourself, is just like finding that excitement and that exploration in yourself of like, what can I do? Like, who am I? How do I react to this? And I'm like, I really try to inspire people to find that excitement with themselves and be like, you know, life is incredibly short. You don't know what's around the corner. While it's good, enjoy it. When it's hard, have a little chat with yourself and be like, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to level up? Like, and that sense of not dissociation as such, but stepping back and being like, okay, if that wasn't me and that I was writing this story, what would she do? Like, how would she get through it? I know it's hard to go through it. And I would step back and I think, okay, I'm out for a bit. Ideal scenario, what would I do? Okay, let's be proactive in the sense of learning this, learning that. But I also want her to not rush it and heal and give herself. So it's like, you know, like the saying of like treat yourself how you would a friend, but also I think that comes from a lot of like